Usually, when something goes wrong in the mountains, the reasons are quite simple. They may be tragic, but they are to be expected. A deadly avalanche, a fall on a glacier or into a crevasse, hypothermia. However, there are also cases that are rarer, and they serve to remind us how remarkably deadly the elements can be. Today's story, like many others on my channel, took place in Russia quite recently in the summer of 2023. Ergaki, whose name comes from the Turkic word yernak, meaning fingers, is a natural park located in the western Sayan Mountains in southern Siberia. The peaks do look like fingers reaching into the sky, and many people vacation there. Siberia is known for its natural resources, magnificent mountains, taiga, dense forests, and clean rivers. In Ergaki, there is a recreation center called Zvezdny Peak, which translates as Star Peak, located right at the foot of the mountains. Tourists from all over come here. The mountaineering camp, as the center proudly calls itself, is intended not only for those who want to conquer the peaks, but also for nature lovers who just want to get away from the bustle of the city. Many people come here to ski in the winter, enjoy the fresh air, and enjoy the flora and fauna. It was named after a small peak of the same name, Zvezdny Peak. With a height of 2,265 meters, it attracts both novice mountaineers because some of its slopes are quite easy to climb, and professionals because of the steep slopes that are perfect for training. Most often, climbers come here from Krasnodar, the capital of the region. One of these adventurers plays the main role in our story. On the morning of July 16, 2023, a group of 4 people, 3 men and 1 young woman, professional climbers with qualifications ranging from instructor to master of sports, went to Zvezdny Peak. They were exceptionally prepared and knew all the risks. Their plan was to climb the peak and return to Krasnodar in the evening. They set up a small camp at the foot of the mountain where they would start. The group, which was made up of Yekaterina Repina, instructor Andrei Dubinin, Artem Ikonikov, and Gregory Shevchenko, did not register its trip with the authorities ahead of time, in part because it was supposed to be for only 1 day, and the athletes knew where they were going and had been on similar expeditions many times. It seemed like they were well prepared. Andrei and Yekaterina had even earned Salvation in the Mountains tokens and Seal Angel awards, which are quite difficult to get. Yekaterina also had the title of Master of Sports, and in addition to teaching, was involved in industrial mountaineering. For example, she washed the windows of high-rise buildings and made repairs at heights.
The train takes my body from the Urals to the Sayans. From the 15th to the 20th, I probably won't have a phone signal. We will climb granite cracks, knead Sayan clay with our boots, and learn how to do it right. Hugs to everyone. See you soon,
she wrote on social media. The climbers began at 7 in the morning. The weather was clear, no rain, not even a cloud. Only the fog rose from below, a common phenomenon for the mountains, and the group didn't attach much importance to it. They moved at a quick pace. By 3 p.m., they had only a short route to reach over the rocks, 1.5 to 2 pitches, as they put it. Very soon, a simple, flat part of the trail awaited them. They were in high spirits. The view from the cliffs was beautiful. The fog made it seem like they had risen above the clouds despite their rather low height. Andrei was the first to reach a convenient rock shelf and organized a place to stop, and Yekaterina started climbing toward him. The other 2 climbers were still 30 meters below. In a picture they had taken, Yekaterina was smiling happily. But then, the good weather suddenly turned bad. It began to rain heavily, giving way to hail. Andrei, who was highest up at that moment, got completely soaked through. The temperature fell and it became very cold. At that moment, they were at an altitude of about 1,000 meters, and the only thing they could do was to wait out the bad weather. Yekaterina was still climbing towards Andrei. She had just a little distance left to the shelf, literally 1.5 meters, before a loud deafening sound was heard. There was a bright flash, and behind her, darkness. In that second, the lives of all 4 climbers changed forever. Yekaterina walked along the railing onto the shelf. She had only 1.5 meters to get to me, and a sender was quickly stretched to pull out the last point before the stop. Suddenly, there was a loud bang and I saw a yellow flash. I lost consciousness. I don't know how long I remained unconscious. When I come to my senses, there was some kind of blue-red carpet before my eyes. I felt no pain. I thought I was sleeping at home. Then I finally woke up. There was a hellish pain in my legs. In front of my face, there was a granite shelf strewn with hail balls. I involuntarily screamed loudly in pain. There are palm-sized holes from lightning on my pants, Andrei recalled. He finally came to his senses and began to search out and call the rest of his comrades. He saw that Yekaterina was hanging motionless on the lanyard. Her lower body was on a rock shelf, which she had managed to reach, and her upper body was hanging down like a rag doll. There was dead silence. Handfuls of icy hail rained down on them. My first thought was that everyone was dead. I shouted, "Is anyone alive?" Silence. I screamed some more. I heard Gregory yell out from below. I realized Yekaterina needed to be evacuated right away. My legs didn't work. I crawled to her and tried to pull her out onto the shelf by her jumars to lay her on her back. I worked with only my hands. Nothing came of it. Andrei briefly described the first moments. Despite his severe pain and barely working legs, he crawled to Yekaterina to provide first aid. However, as he got closer, he noticed that her skin was blue and foam was caked on her lips. With great difficulty, I pulled Katya onto the shelf with just my arms from a lying position. I rolled her onto her back. Her skin was bluish, she had foam in her mouth. I removed the foam with my fingers, undid her helmet, and unbuttoned her clothes, and tilted her head back. I placed the rings of a safety rope under her neck. I couldn't sit down or stand up, so I started doing chest compressions on her while reclining. I called Gregory for help. At first, he doubted that I had fastened the railing well enough. Then he began to climb. When he got up, he said that half an hour had already passed since the lightning struck. The tragedy occurred at 3:30 p.m. The girl, who had been dead for half an hour, could no longer be saved. She was not breathing. Her heart had stopped the moment she was hit by lightning, which passed through her entire body. A split second, that's all it took. Gregory took my place. We did compressions while we had strength. I was shaking violently. I was lying wet on a shelf in the light clothes I had been wearing when I climbed. Gregory covered me with my rain jacket, which had been in Yekaterina's backpack, and her self-removing pants. We took a piece of polyethylene and her phone and fastened her body to the station. The ropes were prepared for descent. Andrei, still shaking, went down to the third climber and through his clothes injected himself with Nefopam, a painkiller that relieves chills. After that, the 3 survivors used Yekaterina's phone to call rescuers and acquaintances, other professional climbers, to report what had happened and where they were. Despite everything, they needed to save their own lives and go down to the foot of the mountain on their own for help. The rescuers promised over the phone to get them right away, but the climbers couldn't fully count on it, realizing that their health could deteriorate at any moment and they would no longer be able to walk. Descending increased their chances. By this time, the weather had let up. The rain stopped as quickly and suddenly as it had started. The men descended in the dark, and at about 10:30 p.m., they found themselves at the bottom, huddled together, covered in polyethylene. They spent the whole night like that. They did not have any equipment like a gas burner, sleeping bags, or tents. On July 17th, the group was discovered by climbers from Abakan, who gave them mats and sleeping bags and tea and food. Then the group approached Zvezdny Peak, where they had camped a few days earlier. There were many people there, including doctors who could give them a checkup. Andrei was in the worst condition. He could hardly feel his legs, and the rescuers took him down with the help of horses. The rescuers put Artem and me on horses and began transporting us to the highway. I had to spend 4 hours in a saddle, said Andrei. Artem received severe burns, but Gregory fortunately was not injured. With the help of other climbers, the trio reached Lake Zvezdny, where they finally met the main rescue team and told them what happened. They were hospitalized, and Yekaterina's body was lowered from the peak a day later, on July 18th. Only 27 years old at the time of her death, she was buried on July 30th. I express my sincere condolences to Yekaterina's family and everyone who knew her. We have lost a close friend, an open and honest person, a professional in her field. We had been talking about further joint climbs with her and made plans for the future. This is now unfortunately a thing of the past. It was a terrible tragedy, an irreparable loss, said Andre about her. A lightning strike usually kills quickly, literally in a second or less. A person dies from multiple internal burns, often right on their internal organs. The worst thing that can happen is when lightning passes straight through the body, which apparently is what happened to Yekaterina. She was gone within a few moments, and likely she didn't even have time to realize what had happened. According to statistics, 10% of people struck by lightning die immediately after the strike or in the hospital within a day or two. 80% suffer burns and lifelong scars. Sometimes a lightning strike can cause severe brain injury. It's impossible to predict how lightning will affect you. All other members of the group escaped with the less serious wounds because they were not in direct contact with the lightning. However, they spent quite a long time in the hospital and Andre was in the burn center. The lightning burned and damaged the nerve endings in his legs. It is unknown whether he was able to fully recover because his social media accounts are now private. Could they have somehow avoided their fate? It is often difficult to predict weather changes in the mountains even after looking at the forecast. In this regard, they did everything right. They set out on a clear, bright day. Fog doesn't indicate that the weather will get worse, especially in the morning, and remember, they started at 7 a.m. However, when it started to rain, it was quite risky and dangerous to be on a steep cliff, but they couldn't descend quickly. A lightning strike usually doesn't happen out of the blue. There are several small but fairly clear signs. For example, if you're close to where a lightning is about to strike, you might have electrified hair. You can also hear a crackling sound and smell a slight scent of ozone. Sometimes a characteristic blue haze appears around people or objects, and the skin begins to itch a little from static electricity. What can you do if that happens? Experts suggest taking a special position, sitting or squatting, and keeping your knees and feet close to each other to create only one point of contact with the ground. This, of course, is not a 100% way to avoid being hit by lightning, but in this position, you significantly increase your chances of survival. Never lay flat on the ground. They also recommend getting rid of any metal objects. People who were struck by lightning and had, for example, an iPod around their neck received more serious injuries. So if you're caught in bad weather, take off the metal. Of course, you should also get away from elevated surfaces such as hills and peaks as quickly as possible. Don't hide under a lone tree. Try to find a small low forest and stay there. Also, during a thunderstorm, don't take shelter under sheer rocks. They might collapse. If you're in a group, try to split up, so even if one of you is struck by lightning, the rest can help out. After being struck by lightning, people often experience cardiac arrest or a seizure. In such cases, it's good to know first aid so you can massage their heart and get it going again. Today's story is more proof of how unpredictable the mountains are and how fragile life is. But what is life without risk? Everyone has their own answer to this question. Let me know in the comments and check out my other videos. And as always, stay safe.